Greetings to you and welcome to this episode of Grace Podcast. I'm Timothy Muse and I'll be your host today as we spend this time together. It's a joy to be with you. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for making this podcast a part of your journey. And as always, thank you for being on the journey. Thank you for incorporating this journey in your life, for taking the time, having the courage to ask the big questions about where you are, about where your life is at, about where you're going, about where you need to put energy. You know, our life is so full of things. And as we live our life, sometimes we give less energy to one thing and more energy to another. Well, it's important to have the self-awareness to be able to step back and say, okay, what needs some energy in my life now? What needs some focus? Where am I lacking? Where am I struggling? Now, this does not mean that your life is bad. Please don't hear me say that. Your life may be very full and very wonderful, but there's always places where we can add energy, where we can give attention, where we can lean into and better ourselves. So thank you for being here. Thank you for, at least asking the question. Even asking the question is a powerful thing. So good for you for being here. Good for you for asking the question. And thank you for allowing me to come alongside you, for allowing this podcast to be part of that question. If it's helpful, please share it out there. Put it out there in your social media feeds. I post on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. If you follow me or the life coaching on any one of those feeds, you're going to see the episodes. If you are on one of the listening platforms, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Amazon Music, follow us, give us a rating and review. When you follow us, people know that the platforms know that people are listening. So when other people are looking for information like this, the platform says, hey, look, people are listening to this, and you'll get a notification when a new episode comes out. And if you want to reach out to me directly, GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. GraceLifeCoaching.com is where you can reach out to me. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to do some coaching or some questions, dialogue, Reiki, meditation, sound bath, whatever it is, these are some of the things I offer. GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. So I'm really excited to be back. Last week's schedule was a little off. I was taking some time off. I was actually resting, and it was glorious. And as I was resting, I wanted to be able to at least present some content to you to keep things rolling forward. And I felt it was really important in the midst of this time of rest, this series on rest, to talk about my time of rest. Usually I don't do that, but it's important as a podcaster, as a creator, as a person. We all need that rest. Rest is important for everyone. And so I took a little bit of time to rest, to reconnect with my family, reconnect with my soul, reconnect with my balance in the world. So it was really a joy. I want to thank you for listening and tuning in while I was away, but it is a joy to be back. It is a joy to be back and back into this series on the power of rest, back into this work on why rest is so important. And we've had some really good episodes about some really good stuff around rest and why rest is important and recognizing burnout and creating daily rhythms in life. So today we're going to answer a question that seems almost backwards. Can rest actually help you accomplish more? All right. Now, at first glance, that sounds impossible. Our culture teaches us the opposite. If you want more success, work harder. If you want to get ahead, put in more hours. If you want to accomplish your dreams, never stop. Keep pushing. But what if working harder isn't always the answer? What if working harder isn't always the best answer? What if clarity is more valuable than speed? What if purpose isn't discovered while rushing, but while slowing down? That's what we're going to do today. Today we're going to talk about purpose. Not simply finding something to do, but discovering why you do it. Because the people who make the greatest impact in the world aren't usually the busiest. They're the clearest. They have clarity and vision and purpose, and they know how to achieve it and pursue it. So that's where I want to go today. That's what I want to bring forward in this series on the power of rest. And that is asking the question, can resting actually help you accomplish more? Now, we're going to start by really defining something really important. There is a difference between being busy and living with purpose. There's a difference between being busy and living with purpose. Imagine two people. The first person's calendar is completely full. Meetings and appointments and projects and emails and errands and phone calls. Every minute is scheduled. They're incredibly busy. Now imagine another person. They also work hard. They also have responsibilities, but every activity connects to something deeper, something more important. Their decisions reflect their values. Their time reflects their priorities. They're not just busy, they're purposeful. Those two lives may look similar from the outside, but they feel completely different on the inside. Busyness asks, what needs to be done next? What's next? What's next? What's next? Look at the list. Chop it off. What's next? Purpose asks, what matters most? What matters most? Now, that's an important distinction because life will always offer you more opportunities than you have time for. If you haven't figured this out by now, life will always offer you more opportunities than you have time for. It's funny, in my job, I could work 24/7 and never get everything done. And I think many people feel that way, and even if it's not just job, but life and house and errands, I mean, there's a point where we have to go to bed and close our eyes knowing that we didn't finish everything. Maybe there's still a cup in the sink. Maybe the dishwasher didn't get emptied. Maybe there's a load of laundry that hasn't been done yet. There's always more. Life will always offer you more opportunities than you have time for. But without purpose, everything feels equally as urgent. Everything feels like it needs your attention now. Everything. But with purpose, you begin recognizing what deserves your energy and what doesn't. Okay? When we can create purpose in our living, rather than just being busy, but living with purpose, we start to identify what part of our energy needs to go to something and what doesn't deserve our energy. We start to prioritize. And that's where rest can come in, because rest helps us to prioritize. It helps us to move away from that constant exhaustive state and start to get clarity, because exhaustion clouds our judgment. It really does. I mean, have you ever made a decision when you're completely exhausted? Maybe you agreed something you shouldn't have. Maybe you reacted emotionally. That's a big thing. We are such an exhausted people. We are just on the edge of outrage. And it's not because we're outraged. It's because we're exhausted. We're exhausted mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, relationally. And that exhaustion causes us to react. Maybe you forgot something important, which happens. Birthdays, anniversaries, again, it's not because you're insensitive. It's because you're exhausted. Maybe you made a purchase that you later regretted. We've all done that, haven't we? Exhaustion narrows our thinking. When we're tired, we naturally focus on immediate problems instead of long-term vision. Okay? Exhaustion clouds our judgment. It causes us to focus on things that we shouldn't, or narrows our focus. We don't see the whole picture. We might find ourselves asking, how do I survive today? That's an exhaustion question. If you've ever found yourself asking that question, you really need to check your exhaustion meter, because that's an exhaustion question. How do I survive today? Instead of asking, who am I becoming? Who am I becoming? Every day when we engage today, we should be becoming more than we are. Maybe it's just an imperceptible little bit, but there should always be some form of advancement, okay? Some form of growth. Because if we think about flowers and trees and vegetable plants, they grow every day. Maybe you don't see it, but they grow every day. When we start to ask, who am I becoming? That starts to shift our perspective. And it starts to cause us to look. And when we rest expands our perspective on things. When your mind is calm, you think more clearly, which we all know that, right? When your mind's calm, you think more clearly. When you're calm, you start to notice patterns about why you do things. Why do I have so many jars of olives? Oh, well, every time I'm tired and hungry, I go buy a jar of olives, but I don't eat them all, right? You start to notice patterns. You solve problems more creatively when you're resting. You respond thoughtfully instead of reacting impulsively, which is a huge thing. We're so impulsive. We're so at the edge of our being. We're so impulsive. We react responsibly. One of the greatest gifts that we can get from rest is wisdom. It's wisdom, not intelligence, but wisdom. The ability to see what truly matters, the ability to step back and see the big picture, to see the ripple effect in the pond by the decisions that we make, to see with clarity, to see the patterns, to solve problems creatively. And we've all done that, right? You're holding on to a problem and all of a sudden you stop focusing on it and you come to an answer. Yeah, it's really important. Great ideas need quiet. They need that rest. Some of the best ideas, where do they come from? Probably not while people are answering their 73rd email of the day, not during that stressful meeting, not while rushing through traffic. Most people discover their best ideas while walking, while taking a shower, while working in the garden, while fishing, while reading quietly, while driving without distractions, or sitting on the porch. Why? Because creativity needs space. Some of the best sermons I've ever written and preached in my life have come to me while I'm in the shower, because I can't check my phone, I can't check my email, I can't talk to anybody. My mind is open and calm. I'm doing a singular project that I've done for many years, so I really don't need to think about it. So it expands my vision, my creativity. Now, do I write a full sermon in the shower? No. But what I do is I get the idea, I get the lead, I get the direction, and then I can sit down and I can create it. Creativity needs space. When our minds are constantly processing information, there's little room for imagination. There's little room to see beyond exactly what's in front of us. There's little room to connect the dots and see something differently or creatively. Rest creates that room. It creates that ability to have the imagination. Think about nature. Seeds don't grow because someone pull on them. They grow quietly. Roots develop underground where no one can see them. Growth often happens in hidden places. The same is true for your life, my friends. Some of your greatest breakthroughs won't happen while you're pushing harder. They'll happen while you're paying attention. And we pay attention when we're resting. We pay attention when we can calm our minds, when we can quiet our environment, when we can be still. That's why rest is so important, because rest can create our purpose. We can start to see beyond just what we're doing to have a purpose. And purpose is more than achievement. Purpose is far more than achievement. Many people spend years climbing a ladder only to discover that it's leaning up against the wrong wall. Success without purpose eventually feels empty. It does. You can earn more money, receive the promotions, collect accomplishments, cross off goals on your list, and still ask, is this really what I want my life to be about? Is this really who I want to be? Is this what life really looks like? Purpose asks deeper questions. What kind of person am I becoming? How am I serving others? What legacy am I creating? Who benefits because I was here? Those questions can't be answered while rushing. They require reflection. They require honesty. They require rest. Purpose isn't simply about making a living. It's about making a life. And we can't do that while we're rushing to make a living. We can't see the impact that we have while we're rushing from one thing to the next. To create purpose, we have to create space and calm and rest. And that rest then gives us the courage to live differently. Once you become clear about your purpose, something interesting happens. You become more comfortable saying no. Not because you're selfish, but because you know what matters. You become more comfortable in choosing yourself and your energy and your circle. You become more comfortable in setting aside time for yourself. Imagine carrying a backpack with only the essentials you need in life. Now imagine filling it with every random object someone hands you. Eventually you can't carry it anymore, right? Many people live life exactly that way. Every invitation that is offered, every request, every opportunity, every expectation, eventually they become overwhelming. Purpose gives you the permission to travel lighter. You don't have to attend everything. You don't have to solve every problem. You don't have to meet every expectation. You simply need to remain faithful to the life you're called to live. That kind of clarity is deeply restful, and it is created out of deep rest. Okay? So having rest gives us purpose. Purpose gives us clarity. Clarity gives us the ability to live the life that we truly long to live. And it also helps us to see that as we live this life, there are different seasons. Now, we've talked about this before. We've talked about this idea of seasons of life. One reason why people lose their sense of purpose is because they compare themselves to someone in a different season in life, right? A young parent has different priorities than someone whose children are grown. A new business owner has different responsibilities than someone preparing to retire. A college student lives differently than a grandparent. Nature teaches us that every season has its own purpose. Spring isn't trying to become autumn. Winter isn't competing with summer. Every season offers something unique. Your life works the same way. So stop asking, what should everyone else be doing? And start asking, what is the season inviting me to become? Who am I becoming right now? Rest helps us to accept that season instead of constantly longing for another one. When we can rest, when we can get clarity and purpose in where we are right now, who we are to be right now, we can be comfortable in that, not longing for what's coming next. And in that, we can begin living from fullness instead of emptiness. You know, there's a beautiful difference between giving from fullness and giving from emptiness, isn't there? I mean, imagine two pitchers of water. One is overflowing, the other is nearly empty. Both try to pour into someone else's glass. One gives generously and the other struggles. Many of us try to give from an empty pitcher. We do. We offer kindness while emotionally exhausted, patience while mentally depleted, creativity while spiritually dry, compassion while physically drained. Eventually, there's nothing left. Rest refills the pitcher, not so we can keep it all for ourselves, but so we have something healthy to offer others. It's true. You know, your work improves, your relationships deepen, your leadership strengthens, your purpose becomes clear, not because you're working harder, but because you've learned to live with abundance instead of depletion. You've learned to see the value and the power of having a full life rather than an empty one. And yes, does that mean that there might be some sacrifice? Yeah, it does. Does that mean that some people might be unhappy with you? Oh, absolutely it does. But it's worth it. It's so worth it. So ask yourself, when do I feel most alive? What activities give me energy instead of taking it away? If money weren't a concern, this is a big question. And you know what? I mean, I would encourage you to think about this question for yourself and maybe into your system, maybe with your spouse or your children or your parents. If money weren't a concern, how would you spend more of your time? If money wasn't a concern, how would I spend more of my time? What would I do with my time if money didn't matter, if money was off the table? Now, please don't hear me say, you know, that you don't need to make money. Of course we do. We need to live. We need to make a living. But if money weren't a concern, all right, what am I saying yes to that doesn't align with my values? What kind of legacy do I hope to leave? You know, don't rush your answers. Purpose isn't usually discovered in one dramatic moment, my friends. It's revealed slowly, one honest reflection at a time. But those questions can really help you to dig into the deeper. You know, what legacy do I want to hope to leave? How do I want my kids to remember me? You know, in my job, I do a lot of funerals. It's part of my path. It's part of my responsibility. And I sit with families and I talk to them and I listen to the legacy that they share of the deceased. And sometimes the legacies are really beautiful and sometimes they're really painful. You know, they worked so much, or they were never home, or, you know, they were never there at my baseball games, or never came to my dance recitals because they were so busy. What legacy do you hope to leave? Purpose can help you do that, all right? One honest reflection at a time, asking those questions. So here's my challenge for you. Do a purpose inventory. Take 20 minutes. Write down the 5 things that matter most in your life, the 5 things: family, health, faith, friendships, learning, service, creativity. What matters most to you? All right? What matters most to you? Again, if money isn't an issue, what matters most to you? What are the 5 most important things in your life? All right? Then look at your calendar from the past 2 weeks. You know, open it up on your computer. Look at your calendar from the past 2 weeks. You have your list of what matters most, and you have your calendar. Then ask, does my schedule reflect my values? If someone looked only at how you spend your time, would they know what matters most to you? If the answer is no, don't feel discouraged. Simply choose to adjust. Simply choose to adjust. One small adjustment at a time. 1 hour, one habit, one conversation, one decision. Purpose isn't built all at once. It's built one intentional choice at a time. So does your values, are they represented in your calendar? Are they represented in how you spend your time? You know, we can say all we want about what matters most to us, but it is in the doing that we live it out. Does your calendar reflect your values? If it doesn't, then you need to either question your values or question your calendar. And my statement would be question your calendar, not your values. Because you know your values. You know what's most important. Question your calendar, not your values. So as we wrap up today, I want you to remember your life is too valuable to spend it merely reacting. You were made for more than surviving your schedule, more than checking boxes, more than rushing from one obligation to the next. You were created to live intentionally, to notice beauty, to build meaningful relationships, to contribute something good to the world, to become the person you were meant to be. And that journey requires rest. Not because rest slows your progress, my friends, but because rest helps you remember where you're going. Without rest, we often move faster. With rest, we move wiser. And wisdom always travels farther than speed, my friends. It really, truly does. That's what I got for you for today's episode. I hope it's helpful. If it is, please share it out there. Put it out there on your social media feeds. I post on LinkedIn, X, Instagram, and Facebook. If you're on one of the listening platforms, follow us, give us a rating and review. You'll get notifications when a new episode comes out. And if you want to reach out to me directly, I would love to hear from you. GraceLifeCoaching.com is the website. At Grace Life Coaching, we want you to be the best you.